right, so welcome to Brian Murray channel. I originally was going to just do a little bit of music and then talk, but then I just got playing, so I want to do a separate video, and we're talking about what I call historical amnesia, which, I mean, ultimately, I feel like everybody talks about the truth and fact or lies or things of that nature, but they can't offer any proof that will solidify that shows this is this. Um, we're in agreement on many things, and then many things, even the best of our minds on earth are in disagreement on what truth really is, what fact really is, what proof really is. One of the snowflake parts of life itself, that little mystery of we're all different, is that we all have a different perception on what truth is. And so, to top it off, after having this problem, me being born in 1969 and just kind of playing along so I didn't get in trouble, I've come to realize there's no satisfying answers for our past. And in fact, there's a lot of big blank zones where we just kind of shrug it off and say we don't know what happened. And so, for Europeans in particular, let's say, there's no real quantifiable history before 1,000 years ago, let's say. We just crawl out of the mud. And the Chinese people have been able to keep very good records for 5,000 years, but before then, they don't know. So there's always this wall of knowledge where we don't know to before why things we've dug up in the ground have artifacts or have symbols that we've deciphered, and we know by doing this roughly what they mean, but they knew them as well. And from our aging 10, 12, 15, 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. And no one's in agreement. There's no science that can just put this in your face, aside from math, which, if you're not on the in of math, then you probably can't share the enthusiasm, any truth that is derived from math. Most of us deal in words or pictures or images. And so it's kind of funny because history, they say, is created and defined by the winner. And there's some lines in 1984 which would also allude to that idea. He who creates the past creates the future, because if you define what history is, but that's almost a whole nother subject, but it's interesting anyway. But that is possibly why society appears to feel like it's suffering amnesia, whereas maybe there's a certain group of people who really know what's going on, and they do have a concrete idea as to why we, or whatever, the populace, we've been put into this stupor of stupidity and can't remember what our great grandparents knew, or further back down the line maybe none of us have ever known, and we've always lived outside of their knowledge. Madame Blavatsky, Helena P. Blavatsky, alludes to that with the great white elders who live in the Tibetan mountains, who are eternal. If you're to believe in that type of thing, then there's some other group who lives outside of time, who knows what's going on. And they're the ones who've always influenced the people who have been given the job of art or artist to create the symbols, the Stonehenges, right? The things like that. But there's actually a fair amount of evidence that Stonehenge, even if it did exist, what exists now is just a replica that was assembled back in the late 1800s. I don't know if it means anything anyway. I don't know if your past really has anything to do with what you are anyway, is the problem. But I do think it's ironic that we're in such a situation as beings that, and I'm sure it's always been the same, whether you lived in the time of Aladdin or lived in the time of Lao Tzu. There was a historical amnesia. We look back and nobody really knew why we were here, what was going on. Is there an expectation? The idea of gods got thrown around before Jesus manifest and let us know, things like that. So, but that still the persistent historical amnesia, and we take the word of Encyclopedia Britannica or books like that to offer us truth, and that's the point. If you don't have those tools, you have to become an investigator, and that's fine. You should become an investigator too. You should not trust anyone's version of reality. However, you'll find as you become an investigator that rooting out the source of truth, and sorting through fact and fiction, because it's all written by humans, it's hard. It's a grim task. It's nearly impossible. And so I think it's just fascinated me that we kind of look back, and a lot of people want to say, well, this happened or this happened. It's like, well, I mean, we really don't know what happened. We have a certain few historians who pieced together letters or things like that, and put together something far more comprehensible that existed before the day that they decided to make a historical treatise on Rome, or it became poetic. Before then, it was almost scratched off the face of existence. But here's the point: life is changeable, life is movable, and I'm 48 now, so within 30 years, my life will have been scrubbed from existence. And even if I'm as famous as Elvis the King, I only get another 100 years of longevity, in that cycle of people rising and falling, these generations. I'm an expression of my father and my mother, or whatever. But when I try to talk to people about truth, they'll revert back to historical finds and it's not that those things were tampered with or made to be. It's wrong or right. I mean, we don't have a perspective to start digging in the ground and decide what our finds mean. We made up archaeology, and so therefore it works in our minds, and we're comfortable and we're content with the results. But when we say carbon dating, and we say there's a half-life to an atom, and it degrades at a certain rate, and so therefore this thing is this age because it contains the same radioisotope. That's a meaningless statement, honestly. But I mean, I think enough spiritual teachers have come along through history, at least in textbooks. I don't know about in reality, but saying that those things are pretty meaningless, compared to the spiritual experience of here and now, and becoming awakened to here and now. I mean, your effect on reality could be incredibly intense here and now if you could wake up to that. But we live in the history trying to dissect, very bad recollections for sure, and as great as they are, but they're just pieced together stories that are incomplete. And so, but the bigger mystery I was almost alluding to is the fact that when we look at these stone temples that we've uncovered out of sand dunes or in areas near China or wherever we're finding all these pyramids and ancient artifacts, they contain, probably the most significant part is that they contain the belt of astrology, the 12 symbols of astrology, which there is no coincidence that Jesus had 12 disciples. And so here we have this pantheon of gods, from hundreds of thousands of years ago, carved in stone. Who taught these beings this? The only reason I know about these things is because I've read about them. First of all, we assume that people 20,000 years ago were cavemen. I mean, I don't mean I do, but like, as a populace, that's the general popular thought, you know. Before 5,000 years ago, I mean, we were just monkeys. There's no, or whatever, 7,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago, but there's no real understanding of, even scientifically, of where we came from. We don't match anything in the whole entire animal kingdom. There's DNA that's similar, and the rest of it is like so different. And so we have that DNA amnesia. So I just find it funny. It's not good, but I mean, I think it's also meant to be. It's part of God's creation. Like, you're not supposed to go in an infinity in any direction. You're supposed to be looking for God, the center, the point that the source that made you. If you believe you're a nihilist, then you can just do what you want, and you'll, when you die, or what you believe to be death, you will just dissipate off in nothingness, and that's fine. But otherwise, one would have to, and I've pondered so many different ideas of philosophy just down the line of just enjoying the concepts, and always still a big fan of Jesus, but not being afraid to just enjoy a concept and run it out in your head and think of what these ideas might mean. Science has pulled us really far away from God in some directions, but I mean, only brought us closer in others, conceptually, you know. But it's the creator, is what I mean. The reason there is an existence. And I think that may not be why there's a historical amnesia, but it might be too. I mean, who can say? I mean, everything is at the behest of the one being who made everything, so, you know, but most people don't even question that it exists and that it's happening. And so I just feel bad for them, because the other half of the equation, you know, is, I think the original one of the last video was, I mean, so truth. There was a book I read. It was well, originally I read The Idea, which kind of spurned just a rethought of the thought I'd had the thought. But see, information doubles over time. So from the first tool to the stone axe was like 4 million years. This is a concept someone came up with, but it's pretty right on conceptually. So the next tool took 2 million years. The next tool took 1 million years. The next tool took 500,000 years. And by the time we're in the 90s, our tools were developing, well, as predicted by math, because of this exponential, by the hour in the 90s. You know, information doubling. And so anyway, he wrote this book, and I think it was called The Cosmic Trigger. It was Robert Anton Wilson. And but he brought up a guy, and I think his name was Alfred Korzybski, and he was a logician, something like that. But he, you know, the statement he made, which was really profound to me at the moment, was that what it said, what is truth? Well, it's a word. And it's TRUTH. It's letters. So is it really more profound than just the fact that it's a word? There's not a lot of fact in how much better it gets than it just being a word. So it was profound to me. I was like, oh, well, it was a very Zen moment, you know, like truth is a word. And so you have to kind of, truth isn't like 2 plus 2. Truth is the reason you can 2 plus 2, but defining it in words, which are textures, and they're very one-sided. They're light or dark, they're up or down, they're near or far, they're words, they're descriptive. A number isn't meant to be descriptive in the same way. A two is always a two in theory. What a two is, we don't know. It may be an apple, it may be an orange. I guess it doesn't really matter, you know. But those are like the distinctions you start getting into when you are looking for the truth. And so, how you define truth, the scientists know that it's not so easy as just saying, well, this is true. In the book Gödel, Escher, and Bach, Kurt Gödel says, technically, there's no way to prove anything in the set of proofs. You would require all of the numbers and the math of everything that's going on in the universe to prove that one formula ultimately, to account for everything. And so it was a revealing of a paradoxical idea that we can only take math so far. We can only escape from, well, whatever the simplicity that you're meant to be and be content with for so long, and it's going to fall through. It's very much like they say, you know, the devil is the father of lies and the creator of lies. Well, everything here, you know, little speakers and books and things that you have are all an illusion, really. They're like that dream of the thing you had and you lost it, and then you had your dream and you're like, I found it, and then you woke up and it was in your hands and it disappeared, and you're like, oh. Well, reality is kind of like that, you know, and it's a world of sorrow if all of your eggs are in the basket of I love whatever reality more than me, I guess. My well-being, my emotional just contentment at being, and not defined by whether I have guitars or if I have cars or if I have multiple friends. I mean, those things are all wonderful and great, but they do not define you necessarily as an eternal being. In fact, they're kind of contradictory to say that they're keeping you from being that being. And so it goes down to the historical amnesia of being, I mean, and the Bible says it, you know, where we are the fallen angels, and what we fell into was the earth. And for those beings who refuse to go back to heaven because the earth's getting shut down, then there'll be hell, because you won't be able to be happy. So you won't want to be in heaven. And I don't think people want to remember that. I don't think people want to face up to the idea that what they're putting off is going back home and going back to heaven. You have a world that, you know, I mean, it's no coincidence that everyone kind of relates it to the Truman Show. It's all too convenient. It's all too nice. It's all too precious. It's all too incredible. It's all too miraculous that we exist in a state, as far as we know, where we're, you know, the only planet that can have water and ice and oxygen and life, and so if you can't see the miracle of that and see that something has been created for your existence, however, but it's also been possibly created for you to have realizations as well. I mean, you're not just a physical being having complete, well, I mean, you can be, but I mean, you shouldn't be just a physical being, like getting your physical yayas out. It's bigger than that, you know. You need to get control of yourself and your desires and your wants, and that is the cure. Less is always more. If you can be extremely happy by not having to have your whole day full of things. I mean, I guess that's why I started drawing, is because at least I could just sit in one spot while everybody was busy doing their thing, and I could just draw. And that's why I got into. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, ultimately it was a bad idea, but I mean, it did keep me out of trouble. You know, but you have to have something to slow you down, and then eventually you can give that up, and then you see how far you can take. But you know, I think the historical amnesia is meant to be unpierceable, like the idea of the dome of outer space. Is outer space real? Of course it is. Like everything's real. But, you know, are ultimately, were we ever really meant to go there? Is it a there? Probably not likely. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't experience those things and do things, but you're stretching the idea of why you were put here in the first place. And all I see with things that are in the reality that I'm in, like NASA or things like that, SpaceX, blah blah blah, they're trying to escape reality. They're not pleased by why we're here. We're so far from what we were when we were sheep herders and walking across little deserts, and must have been theoretically so much easier to care for each other, and I know it probably wasn't. You know, I mean, the only reason I'm not probably tied to a tree stabbed for the $5 I have is because I'm surrounded by police, is my assumption. But, you know, these are all illusions in some respect. They're really not the point. The point is to ponder God all the time, and then you'll decide who God really is, and how close you can ultimately connect, physically, spiritually, all of it, to God. And you can define it. You can love Allah for all I care. It doesn't really matter, because you're a lot better off loving Allah than just being some type of murderous thug, thief, nihilist who believes in nothing. And, you know, maybe that's the route to going further. I mean, the irony of the Quran is that Jesus is mentioned probably more times than in the Bible. I mean, let's not forget, the Bible is a collection of the Old and the New Testament, which was added to the Torah or whatever, you know, like the law. You know, but we don't want to live like that. You know, people want to complain, is what I've seen. And so this reality is here to trap you if you'd like it. If you'd like, I mean, I don't know if it can be explained any different than that. It is for you to be able to remember and kind of dispel the amnesia. I mean, there's a bigger story too. I mean, there's a possibility that the only thing that's really going on right now is all in your, and I'm like nothing. I don't even exist. No one you know exists. This is all in your head, and this is all your test. And so, which points back at me, and it's me. So the amnesia works out that way because it's all like fairy tale. It doesn't. It's fodder. And that's why people feel like they're living in a video game, because the details get fuzzy if you start to investigate, because that past that we're looking for, that first past, the beginning past, isn't there. And so we're digging in the dirt, or we're looking through our own things, your grandparents' stuff, and we've been around so long that we may have built the pyramids ourselves, and we've carved in them 1,000 times, and we don't even remember. So we're not reliable in that aspect that way. And like I said, I don't think it really matters. I think it's kind of foolish to even worry about the past. Like, what's going on now? Where are you now? Where are you intending to go? And what would please you? Like, what if it's not all about God? What would please you? And what type of being would you choose to be if you had a choice to be anything and everything? Wouldn't you want to be like a God, a benevolent being, a nice being, someone who takes care of people? Uh, that's half the time what we do in video games. We create worlds and take, some of us anyway, try to nurture things and we imagine it. And, humanity's kind of become this thing that's on autopilot, and it's just acting like the consumer animal that it is. And so, without some nudges here and there, nothing's going to change and nothing's going to manifest. And so that's really where it's at. And like I said, the word truth is just a word, and so the holders and keepers of truth have kind of failed. I've often thought that what's really lacking is good teachers. And what's a good teacher? To me, it was someone who actually made the subject come alive and it was exciting. Foolish me. But so I think that's what needed to happen for me. But I mean, the whole world is lacking that in many respects. Out of world leaders. I mean, not everyone needs to be Jesus. How about Bob Marley, or like, I don't know, like a good vibrations. Holy smokes, everything is so angry and warlike. The animosity is high, so I don't promote that. I don't feel like if I were king for a day, I'd be like, well, it's just because I want to destroy North Korea. No, that's not. It would be like, so I can free up a bunch of money for people, and then they would chase me off the land, and so your potential of existence is just going to happen in the moment. And so those are the moments I would say that you kind of just have to focus on. Less the past, but I just wanted to bring it up because I do find it to be something we all, I mean, I can't, from the books I've read, and I mean, it's like reading books that were just made up. Not enough content to say like what really anything's going on. Like, it's like we were stuck here from a spaceship, and you have nothing to do with that information. So it must be all about, as even the Bible says, this is a spiritual battle. So this is all happening and the spiritual forces are leading you to one direction or another. Life is just kind of always developing, and so what to us seems very complicated, and we deny the people of the past that feeling of their life was complicated. They had sophistication, oh, well, they had aqueducts in Rome. They probably had fully running electricity and plumbing in Rome. It was a long time ago. We don't have any evidence enough to, those things degrade over time, wires, and we don't know really. And we should, I guess the point would be, just stop acting like you do know. And a little humbleness goes a long way. Take a big piece of humble pie, and I mean, none of us can stand up and say we know the truth. And so we're going to leave it at that. I'm going to hit the road. And thanks for stopping by.